Well, for decades now, we've heard about plans to split our state in half. They would call Eastern Washington Cascadia. And frankly, that will never happen because adding an extra state would mean adding 2 conservative senators to the Senate from Eastern Washington, and states would never approve of that. Down in Oregon, there is a much more clever idea going on where the more conservative part of the state, and by the way, the liberal part of Oregon has gone completely off the deep end, just like Western Washington. But Eastern Oregon, they want to not form a new state, but join Idaho. It's called the Greater Idaho Movement, and one of the people behind it is Mike McCarter. He joins us here on the Dori Monson Show. Mike, it's good to talk to you, sir.
It's good to talk to you, and thanks for having us on in a wonderful morning in the Northwest.
Yes,
it's super.
Is. All right, so everything in my setup is essentially true, that adding another state would be a virtual impossibility, but you think just having Idaho annex Eastern Oregon is something that really could happen?
Oh, you're absolutely right there. Even our particular process here, people look at it and think, well, that can never happen. But, we look at it in such a way that our traditional values are being trumped on out of our Oregon legislature. Rural Oregon is ignored for the most part. Mm-hmm. It is a playground for northwestern Oregon. And the people are speaking out, county by county, saying, yes, we want to start looking into the possibility of readjusting the border, not creating a new state, just move the border, because border lines are not cast in stone. They're arbitrary. They can be negotiated. They can be moved. They have been and whatnot. And that's our proposal is to say, okay, what would it look like if we moved the border to the east side of the Cascades? I'm
sure that you have researched this. I know that the last time a state border was adjusted was back in the 1800s. What do you have to do? Who do you have to get voting approval from? Is it just the 2 state legislatures, or do the feds get involved?
Well, it has happened recently. 1958, the borderline adjusted between Oregon and Washington along the Columbia River.
Because the Columbia River was a tiny adjustment, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. North Dakota and Minnesota made an adjustment in the century. So it has happened. It does require an agreement between the Oregon legislature and the Idaho legislature. They kind of come up with a compact, an agreement, and how this would take place. And then that goes back to the U.S. Congress for approval. But like you mentioned earlier, because we're not adding any new senators, especially conservative senators, we're just changing the borderline. We see no reason why U.S. Congress would not approve that.
Okay, and the question pops to mind is, why do you want to do this? I'm guessing I know the answer because I know how frustrated Eastern Washington is when they feel they have absolutely no say in state politics. It's very liberal legislature down in Olympia, and Seattle voters overwhelm every vote that might be cast in Eastern Washington. Is that what this is about, that you just feel you have no representation in Salem?
Well, we don't have any representation in Salem, just like you do in Washington with Eastern Washington. But this is not necessarily a political situation. This is a value situation. This is urban values versus rural values. And the rural values that we have are, faith, family, freedom, independence. We're tied to our land. We're tied to our communities in rural Oregon, our schools, and we don't want to pick up and move. But if we have the right to elect those who represent us, do we have the right to elect who governs us? Whether it's Idaho or Oregon. So it's not just saying, okay, we're going to secede from Oregon and we're going to try to go it on our own. No, we're just shifting the governance, because rural Idaho and Idahoans per se match up very well with our values in rural Oregon. And
Okay,
so that's the movement.
Okay, so I know that all my listeners are wondering, take us with you. Why don't you take Eastern Washington? I used to have a place on the Columbia River, on the east side of the Columbia River. So if you annexed Eastern Washington from the Idaho and Oregon border over to the Columbia River, you could take us with you. Why don't you do that too? Come on, Mike.
Well,
we need a life ring here.
I have an awful lot of friends in the Willamette Valley around Portland and Salem, and they're saying the same thing. How can we get involved in it? Well, at some place you got to draw the line, and we've projected our border along the Deschutes River and all the way over to the Southern Oregon coast. So Idaho would no longer be a landlocked state anymore. It would have a deep water port in Coos Bay, and we have to focus on that initial movement before we talk about anything else in Southeast Washington or Northern California or whatever. This is a movement for rural Oregon to become part of Idaho.
Okay.
And
I was
so
also looking at your website, and this is hard for me to imagine, but you said Eastern Washington isn't conservative enough for your newly drawn state. Is that right?
Well, when you look at the conservative matchup over the last two presidential elections, when you're looking at the Spokane area and up there and that, it tends to be a little less conservative than Idaho. Idaho's fear of the people are fearing the fact that more people are going to attach themselves to Idaho and then start changing the values and changing the vote there and so on. And we're not. We just want to come alongside them and say, hey, Idaho, adopt us, please. Okay. And, from that point
two more
on.
questions. Two more questions just pop into my mind as we're speaking here. You said you would be Eastern Oregon and then southwestern Oregon to the ocean. Why would the Oregon legislature vote to give up a deep water port at Coos Bay? And how would the Idaho legislature be able to fund highway improvements in all of eastern and southwestern Oregon? I mean, that's another big take on without a lot of new tax dollars coming in. So what about those two things?
Yeah, good questions. Southwest Oregon, down on the coast, down there. Portland, the Port of Portland is not being utilized enough as it is. So why are they concerned about the port in Coos Bay with it? And, just let it be and let them concentrate on trying to get, as much freight and whatnot going through the Port of Portland. But Northwest Oregon subsidizes rural Oregon. And you just mentioned, why would Idaho want to pick up this debt load, roads, schools, prisons, stuff like that. Our counties, income-wise, match up very close with the counties of Idaho. Idaho funds their counties, their schools, their systems, their roads differently than Oregon does. Of course, they have a sales tax there. You guys have a sales tax up your way. Right. And Oregon supposedly doesn't have one, but we know that they bury it through the corporate system, and we're paying it anyway.
No, it's embedded, and I also know Idaho's in the bottom 10 of overall taxes, too. So that's one that's easy to overcome. Well, Mike, I love rebels, man.
Yeah.
I love people who look at creative ways. My last question, if you ever were to make this happen, could you find some room for my wife and me somewhere in your new state?
Yeah, the combination of rural Oregon and Idaho would make Idaho the third largest state in the union behind Alaska and Texas. There's plenty of room. Come on down. There's not a lot of people down in the Idaho area, So 860,000 Oregonians would become Idahoans without one single person moving into the existing Idaho.
All right. Okay.
So come on
I'll
down.
make it 860,002 then after all said and done.
Gotcha.
Okay. Like you said, I love rebels. I love people who don't just get frustrated with how things are, but try to make things happen. So well done with the movement, Mike.
Thank you. Hey, folks, you got questions, go to greateridaho.org. That's got a ton of information there.
greateridaho.org.
Yep.
That's where I went to research before I talked with you.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Mike McCarter, Greater Idaho. Mike, great talking with you. Thanks, sir.
Hey, thanks for having us on, and get a hold of us at any time.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll stay in touch.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
Go to greateridaho.org if you want to know more. And, if I could get my old Columbia River place back, and if they would ever take on some of Eastern Washington. All right, what do you think about all this? You can text me at 98973. That's 98973. Lots more to come here on the Dori Monson Show.